Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Candice, and today we are going to be talking about masculinity and femininity in the Bible. We're specifically going to be focusing on addressing toxic masculinity as well as addressing toxic femininity, which kind of ties a little bit into modern feminism and how we're rolling today. But first, before we get into any video, of course, I'm going to pray for it. Okay. God, thank you so much for giving us so many examples in your word of what to do and what not to do and what is healthy and what is not. I mean, your word is just full of all of the wisdom and things that we could possibly need to live a good, godly life. I pray for wisdom and discernment for myself, for anybody listening to this video, that you would open eyes, ears, and hearts to whatever you want anybody to hear and to get from this video, and that you would give them your love and your wisdom and steps going forward in whatever you would like them to do. I ask in Jesus Christ's name. Okay, so today, like I said, we're talking about toxic masculinity and toxic femininity. But before we talk about, what isn't healthy, we are, of course, going to talk about what is healthy, right? So we know the difference. And if you look at Genesis, if you've watched any of the videos in this series before, specifically that one on Adam and Eve, I'll link it somewhere up here. That video talks about, again, in the beginning, in the Garden of Eden, how God made humans, right? He made Adam first. He gave Adam a purpose, a job, things to do. And then he said, well, it's not good for Adam to be alone. I'm going to make a helper for him, and the word helper is ezer, which is also used in the Old Testament a bunch of times to talk about like God coming in and helping people and God coming in and rescuing people, right? So it's a big job that he gave Eve as well. Now, he made them masculine and feminine, but they are both equal and worthy in God's eyes. They are equal in worth and in value, but they have different roles, right? So for Adam, he was the one who had to provide, protect. He was supposed to lead. He was supposed to step up and initiate things, have ambition, right? And on the feminine side of things, we are relational, right? We are soft, we are feminine, we are concerned with emotions and connecting emotionally with people. We are kind of the emotional center, right, of our families, of our homes, and things like that. Now, God made those things to be perfectly complementary to each other. Not one superior over another or one inferior to another. He made them to be both equal, just different roles, right? We talked about that all up in that video, and if you have not watched it, I would encourage you to go back and watch it. But knowing that that is the case, that no one is supposed to be superior to another, no one is supposed to be inferior to another, this is where God's design is. We're gonna do this like a spectrum, guys, okay? So God's design for masculinity and femininity is right here. It's healthy, it's right in the middle. It's exactly what God wanted, men to be men and women to be women, but both of us to be working together towards a common goal of God's, right? To spread his glory and his love to people. That is what is healthy. That is what God wants. He wants us to work together and to be in it together, loving each other and doing what's best for each other, right? The healthy part. Now, on the spectrum, there also goes to toxic masculinity, and I'm not talking about this modern day, if you have any sort of male trait at all, that is, you're a toxic man. No. That's all of that's a hot mess, okay? I'm talking like actual toxic, doing things that are horrible to other people, or, treating women as though they were like a piece of property or your cow, okay? That's what I'm talking about. And we'll get into that in a second. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, of course, is what I would call toxic femininity. You don't hear that, phrase tossed about because, the women would all be up in arms this day and age, but toxic femininity is a thing. There's examples of it in the Bible as well. This is where, you get the whole idea that all women are goddesses and men are bumbling idiots who don't know what they're doing, or somehow you don't need men because, boss babes sort of stuff, That's way over here, right? Now, of course, a lot of people fall somewhere in on this spectrum. A lot of history has leaned more towards the toxic masculinity side, although modern day and age is leaning way over here these days in a lot of the culture. So we're going to talk about a couple of the biblical examples from either end, and then we're going to talk about the importance of how to bring it back. Even if you've somehow fallen to this side of the spectrum, or fallen somewhere along this side of the spectrum, or believed the lies that are promoted on either side of the spectrum, how you can bring it back to what God actually wants a healthy, male-female relationship to look like. So let's start. I think we'll start with the men. Men, you were created first. We're going to start with you. So on the toxic masculinity side of life, there is one particular story in the Bible that really just kind of popped into my mind when I was thinking, okay, what does actual toxic masculinity look like, right? And it is the story of Amnon, I don't know how to say his name, and Tamar, which is in 2 Samuel chapter 13. And I'm only going to read some of this. I'm going to have you guys, challenge you guys to go read and see what actually happens to Amnon after he's, a dum-dum. I'll let you read the rest, but we're going to give you kind of a summary of what's going on here. This is on the side of toxic masculinity. Now, it says, and it came to pass after this is in the time when King David was around, okay? This is, I think, one of his sons. And it came to pass after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a fair sister, whose name was Tamar. And Amnon, the son of David, loved her. And Amnon was so vexed that he fell sick for his sister Tamar. For she was a virgin, and Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend, whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimei, David's brother. With the names, seriously. And Jonadab was a very subtle man. Subtle as in sneaky. And he said unto him, Why art thou, being the king's son, lean from day to day? Wilt thou not tell me? And Amnon said unto him, I love Tamar, but my brother Absalom's sister. And Jonadab said to him, Lay thee down on thy bed, and make thyself sick. And when thy father comes to see, say unto him, I pray thee, let my sister Tamar come and give me meat, and dress the meat in my sight, that I may see it and eat it at her hand. You see where the sneakiness is coming into play here? He knows she's a virgin. Instead of, asking if he can marry her or something, he's getting a little sneaky, getting her into his private quarters. Let's keep going. So Amnon lay down and made himself sick. And when the king was come to see him, Amnon said unto the king, I pray thee, let Tamar my sister come and make me a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat at her hand. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, Go now to thy brother Amnon's house and dress him meat. I want to stop here just for a second, okay? In this culture, of course, men were leaders. Men were in positions of authority, right? So he is abusing his position of authority here, asking his father to then send his sister. And of course, the sister doesn't have much of a choice here. She has to go, right? So he is abusing the whole situation to get her in a vulnerable position. That's what we call toxic, guys. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was laid down, and she took flour and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight, and did bake the cakes. And she took a pan and poured them out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, Have out all men from me. And they went out every man from him. So now he just emptied the room out except for him and his sister. And Amnon said unto Tamar, bring the meat into the chamber, that I may eat of thine hand. And Tamar took the cakes which she had made, and brought them into the chamber to Amnon her brother. And when she had brought them unto him to eat, he took hold of her, and said unto her, Come lie with me, my sister. And she answered him, Nay, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this folly. And I, whither shall I cause my shame to go? And as for thee, thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore, I pray thee, speak unto the king, for he will not withhold me from thee. So she's saying, hey, don't sleep with me. Like, ask for my hand in marriage. I'm sure he'll let it happen, right? But does he do that? Howbeit, he would not hearken unto her voice, but being stronger than she, forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred wherewith he had hated her was greater than the love wherewith he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, Arise, be gone. And she said unto him, There is no cause. This evil in sending me away is greater than the other that thou did unto me. But he would not hearken unto her. Then he called his servant that ministered unto him, and said, Put now this woman out from me, and bolt the door after her. And she had a garment of divers colors upon her, for with such robes were the king's daughters that were virgins apparelled. Then his servant brought her out, and bolted the door after her. And Tamar put ashes on her head, and rent her garment of divers colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head, and went on crying. This is a primo example of toxic masculinity. Because instead of doing the right thing by her, instead of going and asking for her hand in marriage and then being able to be with her, no, he wanted her without the responsibilities that are involved in that, and decided to take her against her will. And then, because he had done this, now he's feeling guilt and shame, and so he takes it out on her and kicks her out. Like, dude, this is what toxic masculinity is, right? Because as a man, right, he had a position of authority. As a man, he has physical strength that is greater than hers. As a man, he is able to send his people away and stuff like that. He is in a position of leadership. And he betrays all of those things just to get what he wants. That is the definition of toxic masculinity. And I feel bad for anyone who has had to deal with the extent of what toxic masculinity can do, right? I feel bad for the men who have had some sort of hurt that led them down the path to toxic masculinity, and I feel bad for the women who have been used by it, right? It's not healthy. We know this. We know this isn't healthy. And yet somehow we have taken this term of toxic masculinity and broadened the definition of it, right, to include anything that any man does that shows any sort of leadership or shows any sort of actual masculine trait, which is not okay either, right? Like, abuse is abuse, right? Toxic masculinity is toxic. But then when we try and say that, oh, all of this stuff that's not as consequential also falls under that, that's a problem too, right? Now, of course, what he did to her is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Now, of course, dude ends up paying for his sins, but I'm going to challenge you guys to read the rest of that chapter to find out how. You'll be pretty satisfied with how it happens, but that's 2 Samuel chapter 13. Now, of course, God never meant for men to use their masculine traits to abuse other people or to hurt other people. That was not why God gave those traits to men. He gave them so they could use them to provide and to protect, right? And to take care of people. But again, as with any trait that God has given us, we have the free will and the ability to use that trait for good or for evil. And in this particular case, he chose to use his traits for evil. that's, again, this is an extreme example of this end of the spectrum. But it's extreme for a reason, to show you the end of the spectrum. And then we're going to show you the end of the toxic femininity spectrum on the other side. Now, of course, for him to be able to do this to her, right, he had to have some sort of superiority complex, right, thinking that he is worth more than her, that he is better than her, right? Now, if you're back in the middle where it's healthy, God says that we are both equal and we are both worth the same, right? At the end of days, we are all going to be on our knees, equal at God's feet, right? Not one of us is going to be worth more than another. We're all going to be equal, male, female, it doesn't matter where you are, right? That's what God says. Somehow over here, Amnon thinks he's better than Tamar, and that she's really not, worth enough as a human. I mean, you really have to have that sort of superiority complex of thinking, well, they are not even worth my consideration as a human who has emotions and feelings and things like that, to be able to do that sort of thing to another person, right? And that's the thing. God gave men strength. He gave them physical strength, right? He gave them leadership. He puts them in positions of authority. God, gives men these traits, the masculine traits. And it's up to men whether or not they're going to use them for good or for evil, right? Now, on the flip side of this spectrum, we're going to talk about the women. Because even though some men are bad, some women are too. Gotta be fair here, right? So for toxic femininity, right? And on the side of toxic femininity, you get women who have the superiority complex as opposed to men. So women thinking that they are all that and everything else, and having a superiority complex and treating men like dirt, or thinking that, men aren't worth anything, right? Or I don't need no man, right? Making men out to look like bumbling idiots. I mean, honestly, if you look at most TV shows, the ones that actually have family units together, which is very few and far in between, they either portray toxic masculinity, right? Or they go this route where it's the wives are the ones really doing everything, and the men are absolute fools who would not be anywhere without the sense of their wives, who are really running things behind the show. You know what I mean? We've all seen the shows, right? That's where they're rolling these days, is somewhere here. No show really shows in the middle where it should. Most shows are somewhere off on the toxic ends of things. A prime example of this in the Bible is Jezebel. And you've probably heard about Jezebel. I don't know if you know her story, but you've probably heard about her, or at least have heard her name. And she is in 1 Kings Chapter 21, okay? She is the wife of King Ahab. She is a pagan. She was the daughter of a king of the Zidonians. Yeah. And she uses her influence over her husband in some very toxic ways. We're just going to read a bit of this, of course, and then I'm going to challenge you to read the rest on your own. But to sum up the first bit of chapter 21, her husband goes to this guy named Naboth, Naboth, okay? So he goes to this guy and basically is trying to convince him to sell his vineyard because it's close to the palace. He wants to use it as an herb garden, right? But this guy says, no, I'm not going to sell you my family inheritance and my home. And so the king, Ahab goes home, gets on his bed, and has a pouty face about it all. And in verse 5, it says, But Jezebel, his wife, came to him and said unto him, Why is thy spirit so sad that thou eatest no bread? And he said unto her, Because I spake to Naboth the Jezreelite, and said unto him, Give me thy vineyard for money, or else, if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard. And Jezebel his wife said unto him, Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, and let thine heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, and sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters unto the elders and to the nobles that were in his city, dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote in the letters, saying, Proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people. And set 2 men, sons of Belial, which is basically pagan, they're, sons of Satan, shall we say. They're worshiping Satan, before him to bear witness against him, saying, Thou didst blaspheme God and the king, and then carry him out and stone him, that he may die. So instead of trying to, negotiate with this guy or anything else, she's like, okay, let me conspire to have him murdered. Toxic femininity, right? An extreme example, but it's there. Let's see. And the men of his city, even the elders and the nobles who were the inhabitants in his city, did as Jezebel has sent unto them. And as it was written in the letters which she had sent unto them, they proclaimed a fast and set Naboth on high amongst the people. And there came in 2 men, children of Belial, and sat before him, and the men of Belial witnessed against him, even against Naboth in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth did blaspheme God and the king. Then they carried him forth out of the city and stoned him with stones that he died. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead. And it came to pass, when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, that Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give thee for money, for Naboth is not alive, but dead. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, that Ahab rose to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Arise and go meet Ahab, king of Israel, which is in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, whither he is gone down to possess it. And thou shalt speak unto him, saying, Thus saith the Lord, Hast thou killed and also taken possession? And thou shalt speak unto him, saying, Thus saith the Lord, In the place where dogs lick the blood of Naboth shall dogs lick thy blood, even thine. So in other words, Jezebel, manipulated, went behind, and caused the death of someone. She also did this to multiple other people too. It wasn't her first time in the murder game. But you notice here how God confronts Ahab about it first. She's married to Ahab, right? God confronts Ahab, and then he proclaims, problems with Jezebel and what's going to actually happen to her. But he confronts Ahab because Ahab is equally as guilty for listening to his wife and kind of just, letting her do her own thing and rolling with her and being more submissive to her than, actually taking on the leadership role that he's supposed to. And Ahab said to Elijah, Hast thou found me, O mine enemy? Let's see. We'll skip ahead a little bit. He's basically saying, you're going to have issues because you chose to do this. Now, down to 23, verse 23. And of Jezebel also spake the Lord, saying, The dogs shall eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. Him that dieth of Ahab in the city of dogs shall eat, and him that dieth in the field shall the fowls of the air eat. But there was none like unto Ahab, which did sell himself to work wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up. We're going to leave it there. You guys can read the rest. Let's talk about that little bit there. Whom Jezebel his wife stirred up. That is the epitome of it, right? As women, God gave us the ability and, just the natural thing of being able to read the emotions in the room. We are relational creatures, so we know how to talk to other people. We know how to shall we say, use our words to get what we want. We know how to use our words to stir up different emotions. We know how to use our words to make things happen in our benefit or in the benefit of other people, right? Now, as with any gift that God gives us, we have the choice to use it for good or for evil. Jezebel chose to use it for evil, right? She chose to emasculate her husband. She chose to murder people. She chose to use her words to convince other people to do her bidding, right? And as women, we are the emotional centers of our homes, right? We are the emotional center of our family, of the relations around us. And this is evidenced by those phrases like, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy, right? Or happy wife, happy life. Again, these things just acknowledge the fact that women are the emotional centers of our homes. And now we can use, again, that position for good, to use it to benefit the people around us, to use it to encourage our husbands or men in our lives when they're feeling down, brothers, fathers, whatever, when they're feeling down. Or we can use it to manipulate and to get what we want, or to push certain buttons to get certain emotional reactions that benefit us, right? Now, if you look at either one of these sides of the spectrum, the biggest thing present in both of these is selfishness, right? In the middle, where God said we're supposed to be, each one is working together. You are looking out for the good of the other person, even almost before your own good, right? On this side and on this side, the man or the woman is looking out for their own good and manipulating to make that happen without regard for what's going to happen to the people that they are hurting or the people that they are interacting with to get what they want, right? Now, this, of course, again, both sides of the spectrum have been seen throughout history. Both sides of the spectrum can be seen this day and age too, right? I mean, the one that's publicized the most this day and age is over here, right? Although we shun it, saying, oh, all men, you don't need no man. They're, everything about them is toxic, which is not true in any way, shape, or form. But yes, there are men who decide to be on this end of the spectrum. And those men, yes, are toxic. But that does not mean that all men who show any sort of male trait are also lumped in and toxic as well. In the same way that, okay, women over here who are manipulative and controlling and doing emotional things to hurt other people, they're toxic, right? But that doesn't mean every other woman should be lumped in with them either, saying that all women are toxic or all women are venomous or whatever. We know that, right? We tend to lump everybody in as a culture, as a society, but we know that it's really just the ones that are on the ends of the spectrum that are really that bad. Where we should be is here. We should be working together. We are equal in God's sight, right? Yes, of course, God did also make marriage to where the husband is the leader and the wife willingly submits to that. But of course, if you're in a healthy mind space, you're not going to be picking a husband who has the traits of over here to submit to, right? In the same way that a healthy man is not going to be picking a wife who has a lot of the traits of over here to be his wife if he wants to live here in a healthy position. We are to work together. We have different roles, yes. Women, our roles are more in the home. Our ministry is kids and family and relational, right? More than anything else. And men is going out and providing and protecting and doing all of that. Our roles are different, but we are equal and not one is superior to the other. No one is inferior to anybody else. We are both equal and we are healthy and we work together. And when we have that healthy mindset and we do things God's way, right? Things go so much smoother, things go so much easier, there's less strife in your life, everything is more peaceful and happy. So I would encourage you to, if you've lingered somewhere, anywhere on the spectrum that's not here, to try and work your way back. look at God's word, look at what he says, read the rest of those stories, right? To really get a primo example of what's what. And bring yourself back to where God wants us to be. Because God wants us to be working together. God made male and female different, so that way we can complement each other and pick up the parts that the other person is not the greatest in, right? Like, as women, we need men. We do. We say we don't. A lot of us say we don't. But when it comes down to actually, you know, oh, I need to do home projects and I'm trying to lift a couch, you know, by myself or with one other woman, it would be much easier if there was a man here who could help lift it too, because they have much more upper body strength, you know? A man to protect, a man to provide, right? In the same way that men need women for the emotional side of things and, you know, for having families, like, we need each other. We shouldn't be, you know, talking bad about the other sex in general, like as, oh, all men are like this or all women are like that. We should be encouraging each other to be in the healthy space, encouraging each other to do things God's way. I think that's about all I've got to say on that today. I hope this video has blessed you in some way, and I would encourage you to go and read those other verses. They are interesting, how the stories progress. I hope you guys have a great week. Bye, y'all.